It has the hallmarks of deceit. The accusation delivered with chilling calm by the cleaning lady he'd openly scorned just moments before struck billionaire Alistair Cromwell like a physical blow. The German contract, his carefully guarded secret, was suddenly a ticking bomb in her hands. What devastating truth had she just deciphered from its complex clauses, and what in God's name would she do with it? This cleaner just cornered a billionaire with his own secrets. What would you do if you held that kind of power? Share your boldest move in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the inevitable explosion. The biting Cleveland wind of late November was a familiar, unwelcome companion to Eleanor Vance as she trudged the final block to the imposing steel and glass monolith that was Cromwell Industries. Each gust seemed to whisper of dreams, deferred of a life path cruelly rerouted. 10 years. 10 years since she'd last felt the thrill of unraveling a complex German legal text, her mind alive, her future a sunlit horizon. Now her hands, once destined for scholarly pursuits, were chapped and raw from cleaning solvents. Her bright intellect shrouded beneath the invisibility cloak of a night shift cleaner. Her mother Helen was the anchor of her world, the gentle soul whose laughter used to fill their small home. Rheumatoid arthritis had stolen Helen's mobility, but never her spirit. And for Helen, Ellie would gladly mop 1,000 floors, polish 1,000,000 brass fittings. The weight of that love, that responsibility, settled heavily on her shoulders, a counterpoint to the weariness in her bones. Yet within Ellie, a spark of the old fire remained, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished by circumstance. She clocked in the scent of industrial-grade disinfectant already clinging to her nostrils, a stark contrast to the phantom aroma of old books and ink she sometimes still conjured in her memory. The executive suites on the 40th floor were her domain tonight. Silent, opulent, a world away from her own cramped apartment. Each office was a shrine to power, to success. To Alistair Cromwell, the billionaire visionary or ruthless opportunist, depending on who you asked. Cromwell. Even his name seemed to carry a metallic tang, a resonance of cold, hard currency, and even colder ambition. Ellie had only ever seen him from a distance, a perfectly tailored suit, a severe haircut, a predatory grace in his movements. Tonight, however, the usual pristine order of his corner office, a veritable eagle's nest overlooking the glittering, indifferent city, was disturbed. Alistair Cromwell himself was there, a rare occurrence at this late hour. He was pacing a caged tiger in his own domain, his usually immaculate silver-grey hair slightly disheveled. A Bluetooth earpiece was clamped to his ear, and his voice, though low, carried the distinct cadence of a man accustomed to absolute obedience, now laced with an uncharacteristic frustration. He was speaking German, rapid, forceful German. Ellie, emptying a waste bin filled with crumpled papers, more German text, she noted with a familiar pang, tried to be unobtrusive. Her German, once her pride, her passion, was now a secret language, a vestige of a life that felt like someone else's. Cromwell's German was fluent, certainly, but strained. He seemed to be grappling for the right words, the precise nuance. At one point, he mangled a complex legal phrase, something about Gewährleistungsausschluss warranty disclaimers, then swore under his breath in English as he terminated the call with a frustrated sigh, yanking the earpiece off. He didn't seem to notice her. He stalked over to his massive mahogany desk, where a thick, leather-bound document lay open. More German. His brow was furrowed, his jaw tight. Ellie, moving with the practiced quietness of her profession, continued her tasks. But her mind, an old scholar awakened, couldn't help but snag on the snippets of conversation. She'd overheard the visible tension radiating from the man. He looks even more miserable with that stack of German papers, Then when I had to clean the coffee he spilled all over his Persian rug last month, she thought a flicker of dry amusement momentarily lightening her own burdens. At least the coffee stain I knew how to handle. Cromwell ran a hand through his hair, then jabbed a finger at a particular paragraph in the open document, muttering to himself in exasperation. This clause, verdammte Klausel, it's going to unravel everything if Becca stalls any longer. He seemed oblivious to her presence, lost in the labyrinth of his high-stakes international deal. The air in the room crackled with his unvented stress. Ellie knew she should just finish her work and melt back into the shadows where she belonged in this world of power and privilege. Her expertise, her once celebrated skill with the precise intricacies of German contractual language, was irrelevant here. She was just the cleaning lady, a ghost in the corporate machine. She emptied the last bin, replaced the liner, her movements economical, almost invisible. As she straightened her gaze, inadvertently flickered towards the open document on Cromwell's desk, a professional curiosity, an old instinct she couldn't quite suppress. Just a glance. A fleeting academic interest in the structure of the German text, the density of the print. It was a complex layout, she could tell even from a distance, likely riddled with the kind of subclauses and conditional phrases that had once been her intellectual playground. It was only for a second, but Alistair Cromwell, his senses perhaps sharpened by stress, and the late hour chose that exact moment to look up. His eyes, the colour of a stormy sea, narrowed first in surprise at her continued presence, then with a distinct chilling flicker of annoyance as they followed her brief, almost imperceptible glance towards his desk. A muscle twitched in his jaw. The silence in the vast office suddenly felt charged heavy. He stared at her, a long, appraising look that made the hair on the back of Ellie's neck prickle. It wasn't the dismissive glance one usually gave the cleaning staff. This was different. This was sharp assessing, and edged with something that felt unnervingly like suspicion. The billionaire director, a man who commanded global markets, was looking at Eleanor Vance, the night cleaner, as if she were a puzzle he was suddenly and unpleasantly compelled to solve. And Ellie knew with a sudden lurch in her stomach that her carefully constructed invisibility had just been compromised. The silence in Alistair Cromwell's office stretched taut, a fragile skin over a chasm of unspoken challenge. Ellie Vance stood frozen, the handle of her cleaning cart suddenly a leaden weight in her hand. His gaze, sharp and analytical, pinned her like a specimen. It was the look of a man who rarely encountered anything or anyone he couldn't instantly categorize and dismiss. And in her simple blue uniform, Eleanor Vance, former academic prodigy, current night shift cleaner, was clearly an anomaly he found irritating. Finally, a slow, condescending smile spread across Cromwell's lips, a humorless curve that didn't reach his eyes. Well, well, he drawled, his voice a silken rasp that barely concealed the steel beneath. He gestured dismissively towards the open document on his desk. "You seem rather interested in my private papers, Ms." He paused, letting the unspoken demand for her name hang in the air. Ellie swallowed her throat dry. "Vance? Eleanor Vance. Miss Vance." Cromwell repeated the name, as if tasting an unfamiliar and slightly unpleasant flavor. "Since you find German legal documents so fascinating, perhaps you'd care to enlighten me. You have an opinion, perhaps?" His tone was pure mockery, dripping with the casual cruelty of a man who believed himself utterly untouchable. He leaned back in his expensive leather chair, arms crossed, the picture of arrogant amusement. "Go on. If you're so smart, then translate it. Let's all have a good laugh before you get back to your duties." The words designed to demean, to put her firmly back in her place, paradoxically ignited a small defiant flare within Ellie. Oh, translation, is it? She thought, a spark of her old fire, cutting through the years of resignation. You probably think the only language I understand is floor wax. All right, Mr. Billionaire, let's see who really needs a dictionary right now. The years of forced humility, of intellectual starvation, suddenly felt like a dam about to break. Fear warred with a sudden reckless surge of something that felt dangerously like resolve. Her mother's medical bills, the endless grinding worry. Those were real. But so was the insult in his voice, the casual dismissal of her very being. She took a breath, the scent of lemon polish and latent power filling her lungs. "Perhaps I could, Mr. Cromwell?" she said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Cromwell's eyebrows shot up, his smirk widening. He clearly hadn't expected her to call his bluff. "Oh, you could," he chuckled. "By all means, Miss Vance. Impress me." He waved a hand magnanimously towards the desk. Ellie placed her cleaning cart carefully to one side. She walked towards the imposing desk, each step feeling both impossibly heavy and strangely light. The sheer audacity of what she was doing was not lost on her. She, Eleanor Vance, the cleaner, was about to translate a confidential high-stakes legal document for Alistair Cromwell, the billionaire titan. The situation was so absurd, it was almost liberating. She stood before the desk, the polished mahogany reflecting her indistinct form. The document was, as she'd suspected, dense. Complex sentence structures, highly specific terminology. A thrill cold and sharp as the November wind outside shot through her. This was her language, her battlefield. "May I?" she asked, her voice, quiet but firm, indicating the document. Cromwell, a glint of genuine surprise, now mixing with his amusement, merely nodded a king, granting a peasant a momentary audience. Ellie leaned forward, her eyes scanning the first paragraph. The years seemed to peel away. The fluorescent lights of the office receded, replaced by the focused glow of a library lamp, the scent of old paper. Her mind, sharp and agile, engaged with the text, dissecting, analyzing, translating with a speed and precision that came from years of rigorous training and innate talent. She didn't touch the document, her hands clasped loosely behind her back, a habit from countless hours in archives. Her voice, when she began to speak, was clear, devoid of the hesitation or deference one might expect. She simply translated her English words, mirroring the complex German with an effortless grace. The initial lines dealt with shareholder agreements, voting rights fairly standard, if intricately phrased. Cromwell listened, his smirk slowly fading, replaced by an expression of grudging attention. He hadn't expected this. Not this level of fluency, this immediate grasp of complex legal jargon from the woman who emptied his trash. As Ellie continued, her voice gaining a quiet confidence, she began to delve deeper into the heart of the document. She navigated clauses pertaining to intellectual property, to market share exclusivity, to non-disclosure agreements that were almost draconian in their scope. The situational irony was palpable even to Ellie herself. There she stood in her faded blue uniform, a name badge her only adornment, unraveling the coded language of power and wealth, while the man who wielded that power watched her with an expression that was rapidly morphing from disbelief into something much harder to read. Then she reached Section 4, Subclause B. Her voice faltered animation. A chill traced its way down her spine. The German text here was particularly convoluted, deliberately opaque, but its meaning to her trained eye was chillingly clear. It detailed conditions under which a controlling interest could be acquired by the German counterparty, contingent upon certain performance failures or managerial misalignments within Cromwell Industries. It was a back door, a beautifully crafted, legally ambiguous Trojan horse. Ellie paused her gaze, lifting from the document to meet Cromwell's. His eyes were no longer amused. They were narrowed sharp as ice shards, fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. The air in the room thickened, the earlier tension returning tenfold. She took a shallow breath. "Mr. Cromwell." She began, her voice low but carrying the weight of her discovery. "This particular section, it outlines a mechanism for a hostile takeover predicated on subjective performance metrics. The language here specifically, the phrasing around Ermessensentscheidung des Aufsichtsrats, the discretionary decision of the supervisory board, it's exceptionally broad. It grants almost unilateral power to the acquiring party under vaguely defined circumstances." She let the implications hang in the air. The silence was absolute, save for the faint hum of the city far below. Then, pointing a delicate, steady finger towards a specific sentence within the sub-clause, she continued, her voice dropping further each word, chosen with deliberate precision. "And this phrase here, sir, regarding the Verzicht auf weitere Rechtsmittel, the waiver of further legal recourse upon enactment. Mr. Cromwell, this clause. It's not just disadvantageous," she said, her eyes holding his unflinching. "It has the hallmarks of deceit." The final damning word, deceit, hung in the opulent air of Alistair Cromwell's office like a poisonous vapor. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant, mournful cry of a ship's horn from Lake Erie. Cromwell's face, moments before a mask of arrogant amusement, had gone rigid. An unnerving stillness settled over him, the predatory calm of a creature assessing an unexpected threat. The ice in his eyes seemed to deepen, to harden. Then slowly he pushed himself up from his chair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The menace was in his posture, in the deliberate way he rounded the massive desk, each step measured, bringing him closer to where Ellie stood. "That's a remarkably bold assertion. Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "For a cleaning lady." He stopped a mere arm's length from her. "Perhaps you're overtired. Perhaps your vivid imagination is running away with you." Ellie'd feel her own pulse, a frantic bird trapped in her chest. But she held his gaze. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, yet the intellectual clarity, the certainty of what she'd seen in that convoluted German, was a stronger force. "I assure you, Mr. Cromwell, I am neither overtired nor imaginative when it comes to contractual German. I simply translated what is written." A muscle feathered in Cromwell's jaw. He studied her, his eyes raking over her simple uniform, her work-worn hands, as if trying to reconcile the image with the articulate, incisive woman before him. He tried a different tack. "This document," he said, his voice softening, becoming almost conspiratorial, "is of a highly sensitive nature. Its contents are complex, easily misinterpreted by those without the full business context." He paused, then added with a hint of steel, "and certainly not for general discussion. The veiled threat was unmistakable." Ellie understood. He wasn't just dismissing her, he was warning her. "I understand the importance of discretion, sir," she replied, choosing her words with care. "But I also understand the implications of that clause. Cromwell's patience, a notoriously thin commodity, snapped. Your understanding is irrelevant." He hissed, his voice suddenly sharp. "You will forget what you think you saw. You will forget this conversation ever happened. You will go back to your mops and your buckets, Miss Vance, and you will keep your peculiar linguistic talents to yourself. Am I making myself clear?" The air crackled. This was the Cromwell of legend, ruthless, absolute. Ellie nodded slowly. "Perfectly clear, Mr. Cromwell." She didn't trust herself to say more. She turned, collected her cleaning cart, and walked out of the office. Cromwell's burning gaze following her every step. Her shift ended in a blur of forced composure. But once outside, the icy wind felt less like a foe and more like a shock to her system, clearing the fog of adrenaline. The weight of what she knew, what she suspected Cromwell was capable of, pressed down on her. He wouldn't just let this go. He would be watching. Sleep was impossible. The German phrases, the cold menace in Cromwell's eyes, replayed in her mind. By dawn, a decision had formed, hard and clear as the winter light. She couldn't stay silent. Later that morning, looking far more like a job applicant than a night cleaner, in her one good, slightly outdated suit, Ellie found herself outside the office of Diane Holloway, Cromwell Industries' chief accountant. Diane was a woman spoken of in hushed, respectful tones, fiercely intelligent, impeccably principled, and one of the few executives who seemed immune to Cromwell's brand of intimidation. Diane, a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, discerning eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from a labyrinthine spreadsheet, her expression one of polite inquiry that didn't quite mask her surprise at seeing who exactly Ellie had given her name, but it clearly wasn't ringing any bells. Ms. Vance Diane prompted her pen, poised. Ellie took a deep breath. Ms. Holloway, I work the night cleaning shift here. But that's not why I'm here. I have a degree in German legal translation, and last night in Mr. Cromwell's office I was compelled to translate a portion of a contract. A German contract. Diane's perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose a fraction. Compelled, I'm Mr. Cromwell. Ellie recounted the encounter, her voice low and steady, sticking to the facts, detailing the specific clauses that had alarmed her, her analysis of their potential for deceit and hostile action. Diane listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Ellie finished, the accountant leaned back, tapping her pen against her lips. A rather extraordinary claim, Ms. Vance Diane said finally, her gaze unwavering. You understand the gravity of what you're suggesting I do, Ellie affirmed. Which is why I felt I had to bring it to you. She reached into her bag and pulled out several sheets of paper, her handwritten translation and her detailed notes on the problematic clauses, all meticulously compiled in the pre-dawn hours. Diane took the papers, her eyes scanning them with professional speed. Minutes passed. The only sound was the rustle of paper. Then Diane looked up, a new light in her eyes. Respect and a dawning unease. Your German is impeccable, she murmured. And your analysis of these clauses. She shook her head slowly. Honey, she said, her tone softening slightly, her earlier formality dropping away. With men like Alistair Cromwell, their greed usually matches the number of zeros in their bank account. Nothing new there. But this, she tapped the papers, this is audacious even for him. Just then, Diane's intercom buzzed. Her assistant announced Ben Carter, the head of engineering. Diane, after a moment's thought, said, Send him in, Linda, and hold my calls. Ben Carter was a man whose rumpled appearance and easygoing demeanor belied a razor-sharp mind. He greeted Diane, then looked curiously at Ellie. Diane made the introductions. Ben, she said, Ms. Vance has brought something to my attention. Something that I think might concern your department as well, specifically regarding the long-term viability and ethical sourcing for the new European expansion project Cromwell is ramming through. Ellie, again, explained her findings. Ben listened, his brow furrowed in concentration. He'd had his own misgivings about the opaque nature of the German deal, the rushed timelines, and some quiet directives from Cromwell to cut corners on material specifications for upcoming production lines presumably tied to it. When Ellie finished, Ben let out a long whistle. So basically, he said, running a hand through his already untidy hair, the company's blueprint has a critical flaw in the ethics section. And if we don't patch it, ASAP the whole system's gonna crash. He looked from Ellie to Diane. This isn't just bad business. This is a corporate time bomb, and Cromwell's holding the detonator. An unspoken understanding passed between the three of them. They were from different rungs of the corporate ladder, different worlds within the same company, but a common purpose now bound them. The question is, Diane said, her voice grim, what do we do? And how much time do we have? Over the next few days they met in snatched, clandestine moments, a quick coffee in the crowded basement cafeteria, a chance encounter in a rarely used stairwell. Ellie, with her access to the executive wing at night, became their eyes and ears, noticing subtle changes. Shredding bins filling up faster than usual in certain offices, hushed, tense conversations behind closed doors. Diane scoured financial projections, looking for discrepancies that might corroborate Ellie's fears. Ben tried to discreetly assess the technical implications of the deal, what it would mean for production and quality control. The pressure was immense. Cromwell, though outwardly unruffled, seemed to exude an aura of heightened vigilance. Ellie felt his eyes on her even when he wasn't there, a prickling sense of being watched. One afternoon, a mid-level manager, a notorious sycophant named Peterson, stopped Ellie in the hallway, his smile overly friendly, his questions about her sudden interest in corporate affairs a little too pointed. The warning was clear. Then Diane, through a trusted contact in the legal department, got the news they'd dreaded. The signing ceremony, she told Ellie and Ben, her voice tight with urgency, during a hurried meeting in her car in the parking garage. It's been moved up. Mr. Victor Albright and the German delegation are arriving in 3 days. 3 days, people. If we don't expose this before those pens hit paper, it's all over. The 3 days leading up to the arrival of the German delegation passed in a blur of anxious anticipation for Ellie, Diane, and Ben. Sleep was a luxury none of them could afford. They met in furtive whispers, refining their strategy, painfully aware that their window of opportunity was closing with terrifying speed. Alistair Cromwell, seemingly confident, moved through the corporate headquarters like a shark gliding through familiar waters, his pronouncements about the impending German partnership growing bolder, more self-congratulatory. But Ellie noticed the subtle signs, the increased presence of his personal security detail, the way his eyes, often cold, now held a feverish, almost predatory gleam. He was a man on the verge of a great triumph or a great fall. On the morning of the signing, the executive floor of Cromwell Industries buzzed with an almost theatrical energy. Floral arrangements, vast and ostentatious, adorned every available surface. A nervous energy permeated the air, thick with the scent of expensive coffee and unspoken ambition. Ellie, on her regular early morning cleaning rounds before her shift officially ended, felt like an invisible ghost, witnessing the preparations for a royal wedding, or perhaps an execution. Mr. Victor Albright and his contingent of German executives arrived precisely at 10 a.m. Albright was a man in his early 60s, tall and lean with an air of quiet authority, and eyes that missed nothing. He exuded a calm, old-world professionalism that stood in stark contrast to Cromwell's more flamboyant, aggressive style. His team was equally sharp, their expressions serious, their briefcases no doubt containing their own meticulously reviewed copies of the contract. The main boardroom, a cavernous space dominated by a vast, polished mahogany table and a panoramic view of the Cleveland skyline, was the designated stage for this final act. Cromwell, flanked by his senior legal counsel and a retinue of vice presidents, greeted Albright with an effusive warmth that seemed just a fraction too forced. Handshakes were exchanged, polite smiles plastered on faces the ritualistic dance of high-stakes international business commencing. Ellie, Diane, and Ben had a plan, desperate and fraught with risk. Diane had managed through sheer force of will and a carefully cultivated network of contacts to secure them a brief, unscheduled 5-minute window with Mr. Albright's chief of staff just prior to the main meeting under the guise of a last-minute logistical query from accounting. It was their only shot. As the German delegation was ushered into a private anteroom for refreshments before the formal proceedings, Diane and Ellie, with Ben lingering discreetly nearby, approached Albright's aide, a stern-looking woman named Frau Müller. Frau Müller. Diane began, her voice calm but firm. "Thank you for seeing us. This is Ms. Eleanor Vance, a specialist in German legal linguistics." Frau Müller's eyebrows arched slightly. Ellie, in her neat but simple business attire, a far cry from her cleaning uniform, yet still modest compared to the power suits around her, stepped forward. Frau Müller-Ellie said, her German accent pure academic. "I have urgent information regarding critical discrepancies and potentially deceptive clauses within the German version of the contract Mr. Albright is scheduled to sign today. These are matters of significant legal and financial implication that may not have been fully transparent." Frau Müller's expression hardened. "That is a very serious accusation, Ms. Vance. Our legal team has thoroughly vetted this document." With all due respect, Ellie countered some nuances, particularly concerning German case law on fiduciary duty, and the interpretation of discretionary powers can be deliberately obscured. "I have prepared a brief highlighting these specific concerns." She offered a slim folder. Frau Müller hesitated, then took the folder. Her eyes flicked over the first page, then the second. The arch of her eyebrows rose higher. After a tense minute, she looked up, her gaze sharp and unreadable. "Wait here," she commanded, then disappeared into the room where Mr. Albright was waiting. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Ben joined them, his face pale but resolute. "Any second now, Cromwell will be expecting them in the boardroom," he muttered. Just as panic began to set in, Frau Müller reappeared. Her expression was grim. "Mr. Albright will see Miss Vance, alone. You have precisely 3 minutes before the main meeting is scheduled to begin. Do not waste them." Ellie's heart leapt. This was it. She followed Frau Müller into the anteroom. Mr. Victor Albright stood by the window, the folder she had prepared open in his hand. He turned as she entered, his gaze direct, penetrating. "Miss Vance," he said, his German as precise as hers, "your analysis is illuminating and deeply troubling. Explain this clause regarding the subsidiary asset transfer, quickly." In the next 3 minutes, Ellie, adrenaline coursing through her veins, laid out her findings with lucid precision. She didn't just translate. She contextualized. She cross-referenced. She highlighted the subtle manipulations of language, the legal loopholes deliberately woven into the German text that effectively neutered Cromwell Industries' protections while granting almost unchecked power to the acquiring entity under specific, ambiguously worded conditions. She spoke not as a cleaner, not as a victim, but as the expert she truly was. Albright listened impassive, asking only 2 or 3 razor-sharp questions that cut to the core of the matter. As she finished, he nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Vance. Your intervention is noted." His face gave nothing away. Ellie was escorted out, just as Cromwell himself, beaming with anticipation, arrived to personally lead the German delegation into the main boardroom. The doors closed, and the 3 allies were left in the hallway, their fate and the company's now behind those closed doors. The wait was agonizing. 20 minutes crawled by, 30. Then the boardroom doors opened, not with the triumphant fanfare they'd expected, but with a sudden, almost violent burst. Alistair Cromwell stormed out his face, a mask of thunderous fury. His legal counsel trailed behind him, pale and shaken. Following them was Mr. Victor Albright, his expression now like granite. He paused in the doorway, his gaze sweeping across the stunned executives gathered outside, finally landing on Ellie, Diane, and Ben. "Ladies and gentlemen," Albright announced, his voice resonating through the sudden, deathly hush. "Due to the emergence of critical new information questioning the integrity of the proposed agreement and certain representations made therein, today's signing will not proceed." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Albright continued, his voice cold as a winter gale. "Furthermore, my organization will be insisting on a full, independent, and immediate forensic audit of Cromwell Industries' recent dealings with particular scrutiny on the development and negotiation of this contract." And as of this moment, he fixed his gaze on the retreating, apoplectic figure of Alistair Cromwell. "We will require Mr. Cromwell to take an immediate and indefinite leave of absence from all executive duties pending the outcome of this investigation." The declaration struck like a lightning bolt. Alistair Cromwell, the untouchable billionaire, suspended. The carefully constructed facade of his empire had not just cracked, it had shattered. In the ensuing chaos, the shocked whispers, the frantic scurrying of executives, the dawning realization of a monumental corporate implosion, Ellie Vance stood beside her newfound allies, a tremor of fear mixing with a profound, almost unbelievable sense of relief. The but-suddenly moment had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed Alistair Cromwell's dramatic suspension were a maelstrom of controlled chaos and whispered speculation within Cromwell Industries. Forensic auditors, a grim-faced team, dispatched by Mr. Albright's organization, descended upon the executive floors, their presence a constant, unnerving reminder of the earthquake that had just shaken the company to its foundations. Files were seized, computers imaged, and a parade of tight-lipped executives were summoned for interviews. The air, usually thick with ambition and corporate maneuvering, now reeked of fear and uncertainty. Ellie, Diane, and Ben found themselves in the strange position of being both heroes and pariahs. To some, they were the courageous whistleblowers who had saved the company from disaster. To others, particularly those whose fortunes had been closely tied to Cromwell's, they were dangerous disruptors, instigators of the current turmoil. Ellie most of all felt the uncomfortable weight of this new visibility. She was no longer the invisible night cleaner. She was the woman who brought down Cromwell, a label that felt both terrifying and uncomfortably ill-fitting. The investigation, swift and mercilessly efficient, laid bare the full extent of Cromwell's duplicity. It wasn't just one deceptive contract. It was a pattern, a web of carefully constructed side deals, inflated projections, and hidden liabilities designed to enrich Cromwell and a select few at the immense potential cost of the company's long-term stability and the jobs of thousands of its employees. The German deal was merely the most audacious, the one that had finally brought the house of cards tumbling down. Within 2 weeks, Alistair Cromwell was not just suspended, he was officially terminated, his name expunged from the corporate directory, his portrait removed from the gallery of past CEOs. Whispers of impending legal action from shareholders and regulatory bodies followed his ignominious exit. Throughout this period, Mr. Victor Albright became a more frequent, if still somewhat remote, presence at the Cleveland headquarters. He was a figure of calm decisiveness in the storm, working with the remaining board members to stabilize the ship. One crisp December afternoon, Ellie received a summons, not to an interrogation room, but to the interim executive office, now occupied by Albright himself. Her heart pounded a nervous rhythm as she walked through the now familiar corridors of power. This time, however, she wasn't pushing a cleaning cart. She wore the same simple suit she'd worn when she first approached Diane, feeling acutely aware of its ordinariness in these rarefied surroundings. Mr. Albright greeted her with a professionalism that was respectful, almost collegial. "Miss Vance," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "The findings of the audit have confirmed in every particular the concerns you so courageously brought to my attention. Your linguistic expertise, your understanding of complex legal frameworks, and your profound integrity have quite frankly saved both our organizations from a potentially catastrophic entanglement." Ellie murmured a polite, "Thank you, sir," feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. Albright continued his gaze direct. "Cromwell Industries is at a crossroads. We need to rebuild trust not just with our partners and shareholders, but internally with our employees. We need to ensure that the mechanisms of oversight and ethical conduct are not just present, but unimpeachable." He paused, then leaned forward slightly. "To that end, Ms. Vance, I am creating a new role, a position of significant responsibility, Head of International Contract Compliance and Ethical Review. This department will report directly to my office and will be responsible for the meticulous review and validation of all cross-border agreements and internal governance protocols. It requires a unique blend of linguistic skill, legal acumen, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles." Ellie stared at him, momentarily speechless. Head of a department reporting directly to him. Just last month, a wry, disbelieving voice whispered in her mind, "My biggest worry was a stubborn coffee stain on the boardroom carpet." Now it's multi-million-dollar flaws in international contracts. Quite the career progression, I must say. Albright seemed to read her stunned silence. "I am aware this is unconventional, Ms. Vance. You do not have the traditional executive trajectory, but you possess something far rarer, proven expertise in the precise area where this company has shown its greatest vulnerability, and a moral compass that has demonstrated itself to be unerring. I believe you are the right person for this role." The room seemed to tilt. Ellie's mind raced. The offer was astounding, an opportunity beyond anything she could have dared to imagine, even in her most ambitious student days. But the weight of it, the sheer, terrifying responsibility, felt crushing. Could she do it? She, Eleanor Vance, who, until a few weeks ago, measured her success by the gleam of a polished floor. The faces of seasoned executives, many with decades of experience, flashed before her eyes. How would they react to her? An outsider, a former cleaner, suddenly elevated to such a position. The imposter syndrome, sharp and insidious, sank its claws into her. They use so many buzzwords in these high-level meetings, she recalled with a sudden, almost hysterical, internal giggle. I suspect the main goal is to ensure no one actually understands what anyone else is saying. Could I even learn to speak that language? She thought of her mother Helen, of the quiet pride in her eyes, when Ellie had recounted, in carefully edited terms, the events of the past weeks. Helen hadn't focused on the drama, but on Ellie's courage. "You always had a good head on your shoulders." Ellie Bean, she'd said, her voice weak, but her smile radiant. "And a good heart. That's what matters. A good heart and a good head." Perhaps that was enough to start. Ellie met Mr. Albright's gaze, a new resolve solidifying within her. The fear was still there, a cold tremor in her core, but now it was overlaid with a flicker of determination, a resurgence of the intellectual fire she thought had long been extinguished. "Mr. Albright," she said, her voice a little breathless but clear, I am honored by your confidence in me. It's a profound responsibility." She took another breath. "Yes, I accept." A rare, almost imperceptible smile touched Albright's lips. "Excellent, Ms. Vance. Your office will be prepared. Your team will initially consist of a junior analyst and an administrative assistant, but you will have the budget to expand as you deem necessary. Your first task will be a complete review of the German partnership framework. We intend to renegotiate, not abandon if feasible, but on transparent and equitable terms." He stood extending his hand. "Welcome aboard, officially." As Ellie shook his firm, dry hand, a wave of dizziness of sheer unreality washed over her. But as she walked out of the office, the congratulations of Albright's assistant echoing in her ears, she also felt a new, unfamiliar sensation, a sense of purpose, fragile, yet undeniably present. Her optimism, however, was quickly tempered. As she made her way towards the elevators, she passed a group of senior managers, huddled in a tense, low-voiced conversation. One of them, a vice president named Henderson, who had been a known Cromwell crony, glanced up. His eyes, cold and hostile, met hers. He didn't say a word, but his expression spoke volumes. Disbelief, resentment, and a clear, unadulterated contempt. Ellie's stomach tightened. The battle for Cromwell Industries might be over, but her own, it seemed, was just beginning. The pristine minimalist office, assigned to Eleanor Vance, head of International Contract Compliance and Ethical Review, felt more like a gilded cage than a symbol of achievement. It was spacious, modern, with a sweeping view of the city that did little to soothe the persistent knot of anxiety in her stomach. The title on her door was impressive, the responsibility immense, but the transition from the anonymity of a cleaning cart to the glaring spotlight of executive scrutiny was proving to be a treacherous one. Henderson, the Cromwell loyalist, and his ilk made their displeasure known, not through open confrontation. That would be too crude, too obvious, but through a campaign of subtle sabotage and passive aggression. Important files related to past international deals would go missing only to reappear days later, misfiled and buried under irrelevant paperwork. Meeting invitations for crucial discussions would arrive in Ellie's inbox mere minutes before they were scheduled to begin, or sometimes not at all. Her requests for historical data were met with bureaucratic delays, polite but firm assertions that such information was currently under archival review or temporarily inaccessible due to system upgrades. Ellie quickly realized that her linguistic skills and legal acumen, while vital, were not enough. She was navigating a minefield of entrenched corporate politics, a world of unspoken allegiances and carefully guarded territories. Her small team, a bright but very junior analyst named Sarah and a flustered but well-meaning administrative assistant Tom, were often as overwhelmed as she was. It's like trying to assemble a complex engine with half the blueprints missing, and someone occasionally swapping out the spark plugs for duds, Ben Carter observed one evening as Ellie and Diane huddled in Ellie's office long after most employees had gone home. They were poring over a particularly convoluted supply chain agreement with a South American subsidiary one that reeked of Cromwell's self-dealing. Key pages of supporting documentation were predictably unavailable. Ben, ever the engineer, had sketched out a flow chart on Ellie's whiteboard, trying to trace the flow of money and materials. He tapped a box labeled Oversight Committee, defunct, with his pen. Well, at least whoever's sabotaging us is showing some creative initiative in how they mess things up. He said, a wry twist to his lips. Gotta give them an A for chaotic effort. Ellie managed a tired smile. Ben's pragmatism, his ability to find a sliver of absurd humor, even in the most frustrating situations, was becoming a lifeline. Diane Holloway, too, was a rock. Her encyclopedic knowledge of the company's financial history and her unwavering moral compass provided both practical guidance and essential reassurance. The old guard is testing you. Ellie Diane said, her voice calm and steady, as she reviewed Ellie's meticulous notes on the South American contract. They expect you to fail. They want you to fail. Don't give them the satisfaction. She looked at the mountain of paperwork Ellie had been wrestling with all week. Welcome to the club of battling photocopiers and nonsensical regulations. At least we have good tea here, she added, with a small, weary smile of her own. One afternoon, Ellie faced her first major internal crisis. Relying on incomplete data provided by a department still staffed by Cromwell appointees, she had drafted a preliminary report for Mr. Albright regarding potential liabilities in a long-standing European distribution network. Hours after submitting it, Diane discovered a crucial set of addendums that had been accidentally omitted from the files given to Ellie. Addendums that significantly altered the risk profile, making Ellie's initial assessment appear alarmingly naive. Panic seized her. This was exactly the kind of ammunition her detractors were waiting for. For a moment, the old insecurities, the voice of the night cleaner whispering that she was out of her depth, threatened to overwhelm her. But then she thought of her mother, of the quiet courage Helen displayed every single day. She thought of Diane's unwavering support, of Ben's cheerful resilience. Taking a deep breath, Ellie picked up the phone. She didn't try to hide the error. She didn't try to shift blame. She called Mr. Albright's office, directly explained the situation calmly, and factually detailed how the new information had come to light, and outlined her plan to issue a corrected comprehensive report within 24 hours. It was a difficult call, one that left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. To her surprise, Albright's response, conveyed through his chief of staff, was not condemnation, but a curt acknowledgement of her diligence in rectifying the error and an expectation that future checks and balances would be even more robust. Ellie had made a mistake, yes, but she had owned it, and in doing so had inadvertently demonstrated a level of accountability that had been sorely lacking under Cromwell. It was a small, hard-won victory, but it felt significant. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Her meticulous work, her refusal to be intimidated, her transparent approach, even her willingness to admit when she needed more information or had overlooked something, started to earn her a grudging respect from some quarters. Junior employees from other departments, emboldened by the changes rippling through the company, began to quietly approach her with concerns they'd previously been too afraid to voice. Ellie made a point of listening, of investigating their claims fairly, and when warranted, of advocating for changes that protected not just the company's bottom line, but also its people. She was learning to navigate the treacherous currents of corporate life, learning who to trust, learning how to wield the authority of her new position with both integrity and effectiveness. She was no longer just the woman who translated German. She was becoming a quiet force for change within Cromwell Industries. But Alistair Cromwell, though officially gone, had woven a complex web. His influence lingered in the shadows, in the loyalties he had cultivated, in the deals he had set in motion years before. And one cold January morning, that lingering influence manifested as a full-blown crisis. A news alert flashed across Ellie's screen. A major German environmental agency was launching an investigation into one of Cromwell Industries' key European suppliers, a company integral to their newly renegotiated German partnership. The allegations were severe falsified emissions, reports, illegal dumping of toxic waste violations that could not only result in crippling fines and sanctions, but could also irrevocably damage Cromwell Industries' reputation and jeopardize the fragile trust Mr. Albright was trying to rebuild. Ellie felt a chill far colder than the Cleveland winter outside. The supplier in question was one whose contract she had recently reviewed, a contract that even after her initial scrutiny had seemed relatively straightforward. But now, with this news, she realized with a sickening lurch that the deception must have been buried far deeper in operational details, in technical specifications she hadn't had the expertise to fully interrogate. The phone rang. It was Mr. Albright's chief of staff. An emergency meeting of the Executive Oversight Committee was being convened in 1 hour. Ms. Vance's presence and her immediate assessment of the contractual and ethical liabilities were required. As Ellie gathered her files, her mind racing, she knew this was more than just another challenge. This was a direct assault, a crisis potentially engineered by Cromwell's network to discredit Albright's new regime, and specifically her. The stakes were impossibly high. A wrong move, a misjudgment now could unravel everything Diane, Ben and Albright had fought to achieve. The weight of it all settled upon her heavy and suffocating. The emergency meeting convened in an atmosphere thick with apprehension. Mr. Albright joining via a secure video link from Germany, his face a study in controlled concern, wasted no time. Ms. Vance, his voice was grim. This situation, with our Frankfurt supplier, Bauer GmbH, is unacceptable. The potential fallout is catastrophic. What is your immediate assessment? All eyes in the Cleveland boardroom turned to Ellie. Henderson and the remaining Cromwell cronies watched with an almost vulture-like anticipation, clearly hoping to see her crumble. But Ellie, though her stomach churned with a sickening anxiety, met the challenge head-on. For the past hour, Diane and Ben had been in frantic, focused overdrive. Ben had used his engineering contacts to discreetly inquire about Bauer GmbH's operational history, unearthing whispers of past environmental near misses. Diane had cross-referenced payment schedules and compliance certifications, flagging several anomalies that suggested rushed approvals and bypassed protocols, all dating back to a period when Cromwell had personally overseen the European supply chain expansion. Mr. Albright, gentlemen, Ellie began, her voice clear and steady. The allegations against Bauer GmbH are severe, and we must assume, for now, their veracity. Our immediate contractual position is complex. The original agreement, predating my review, contains clauses that limit our immediate recourse, based on third-party governmental actions, a loophole likely exploited by Cromwell. She paused, then continued. However, Diane Holloway has uncovered irregularities in the due diligence and compliance certification process for Bauer GmbH, signed off by Cromwell himself, that could constitute gross negligence or even fraudulent misrepresentation on our part when that contract was established. She outlined a three-pronged strategy: immediate dispatch of an independent environmental auditing team to Bauer GmbH, full and transparent cooperation with the German authorities, and a simultaneous internal investigation to determine the extent of Cromwell Industries' culpability in the flawed vetting of Bauer. It was bold, proactive, and didn't shy away from potential internal responsibility. The next few weeks were a grueling marathon. Ellie, accompanied by Ben Carter, whose technical expertise was invaluable, flew to Germany. They worked hand in glove with Albright's team, navigating complex German environmental law and Bauer GmbH's defensive, almost hostile management. Diane, back in Cleveland, dug deeper into the financial trails, uncovering a network of shell companies and offshore accounts that suggested Cromwell hadn't just been negligent with Bauer. He'd likely received substantial kickbacks for approving substandard suppliers. It was during a late-night session in a sterile Frankfurt hotel room, surrounded by technical readouts and legal briefs, that Ellie finally saw the full picture. The Bauer GmbH scandal wasn't just bad luck. It was a time bomb, deliberately planted by Cromwell, a way to sabotage the company and discredit Albright if his own machinations ever came to light. And the trigger, they suspected, had been pulled by Henderson or one of his remaining allies back in Cleveland, anonymously tipping off the German authorities at a moment calculated to cause maximum damage. Armed with this growing certainty, and with Ben's team identifying critical flaws in Bauer's waste disposal systems that were far worse than initially reported, Ellie and Albright confronted Bauer's CEO. The evidence was irrefutable. Bauer GmbH, facing its own ruin, agreed to cooperate, fully implicating several mid-level Cromwell Industries European managers who had facilitated the cover-up under duress or for personal gain. Back in Cleveland, Diane's findings corroborated the kickback scheme. Henderson and 2 other vice presidents, their complicity exposed, were summarily fired and faced their own legal battles. The last vestiges of Alistair Cromwell's poisonous influence were finally decisively purged. The crisis, though damaging, ultimately became a catalyst for profound change. Cromwell Industries, under Albright's guidance, and with Ellie's department playing a pivotal role, instituted some of the most rigorous ethical review and environmental compliance standards in the industry. The Bauer GmbH contract was painfully extricated, but new, truly vetted partnerships were forged. Transparency became not just a buzzword, but a practiced reality. Months later, an undeniable sense of earned peace began to settle over the company. Employee morale, once at rock bottom, soared. The fear that had permeated the hallways under Cromwell was replaced by a cautious but growing optimism. And Eleanor Vance found herself, to her own quiet astonishment, respected. Not just for the dramatic events that had catapulted her from obscurity, but for her quiet competence, her unwavering integrity, and her genuine commitment to doing things right. One Saturday afternoon, visiting her mother, Ellie found herself recounting the whirlwind of the past year. Helen Vance, her eyes bright with unshed tears of pride, listened intently from her comfortable armchair, her gnarled hands clasped in her lap. Sometimes Mom Ellie said, a soft smile playing on her lips as she poured them both tea. I still can't quite believe I went from scrubbing floors in those very offices to debating multi-million-dollar contracts with German executives. Life is certainly full of surprises. Helen reached out and patted her hand. You always had it in you, Ellie Bean. The world just needed a chance to see it. The following week, Ellie, Diane, and Ben met for their now customary Friday lunch in the company cafeteria, no longer a place for clandestine meetings, but simply for friends to connect. Ben, a mischievous glint in his eyes, looked at Ellie. So he teased, if you ever decide on another career change, just promise not to become an engineer. Okay, we can't handle the competition in our department. Diane chuckled a warm, genuine sound. Just let her be your boss, Ben. That'll keep you on your toes. Ellie laughed, a light, happy sound that had become more frequent these days. I think she said, I'm exactly where I need to be. Later that evening, Ellie stood by the window of her office. The city glittered below a tapestry of lights against the darkening sky. It wasn't the eagle's nest Cromwell had lorded over. It was a functional, bright space filled with the quiet hum of meaningful work. On her desk, beside a framed photo of her mother, sat a small, crudely carved wooden bird, a gift from one of the factory foremen whose department had directly benefited from a fairer supply contract she'd helped negotiate. He'd been one of the most vocal skeptics when she'd first taken the role. Now he was one of her staunchest, if quietest, supporters. A sense of profound, settled peace filled her. The journey had been arduous, the scars were real, but they were reminders of battles fought and won, of integrity upheld. She was no longer invisible. She was Eleanor Vance, a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and in doing so had helped an entire company find its way back to the light. And she knew, with a quiet certainty, that warmed her from the inside out, this was not just an ending, but a new and far brighter beginning. Eleanor Vance's journey reminds us that extraordinary courage, and profound worth often lie hidden beneath the most ordinary surfaces. How many quiet strengths do we overlook each day simply because we aren't looking closely enough? This story has certainly given us much to reflect on, and perhaps it has for you too. Alistair Cromwell dismissed Eleanor because of her uniform. What do you believe is the true cost of such judgment in our own lives? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and any ideas you have for future stories or improvements that would make our channel even better for you in the comments below. Your feedback truly helps us create more meaningful content. If Eleanor's quiet fight for integrity resonated with you, please show your support with a like and share her story with anyone who might need a reminder that one voice armed with truth can indeed make a difference. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming journeys into the heart of human resilience and the power of the unexpected. Thank you for being with us. Until next time, may you always find value where others might not see it.